Well, hello and welcome back, hopefully, to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here with my co host and colleague and friend, Jim Gurley. And Jim and I had a pretty extensive pregame discussion and brought some clarity and a little fog to me. But the impetus behind it is Jim's going to give a talk here upcoming pretty soon to a group of 20 somethings that are at a local university, probably mostly getting to graduate. And he's going to give a speech. And one of the things that we talked about with this idea, Jim's idea of writing a letter to yourself at the age of 21, writing, if you were to write yourself a letter. So the topics are like advice, context, perspective, getting ready to go out into the world. If this was a letter you wrote to yourself at the age of 21, what would your thoughts and impressions be if you got to open this thing up when you were 40, 50, 60 years old? And were you right, wrong, or somewhere in between? So, Jim, I probably botched that up a little bit, but I hope I'm close enough to this, our wheel with this topic of profession and career and what's next in this case with regard to a significant body of soon to graduate college students.
Yeah, no, you didn't mess it up at all. But I appreciate the setup, Mark. But like you said, when we were talking before we started recording, I think it always has to fit in the context of the wheel. Every episode we do, I think we're getting better at it, and that's self-awareness. Focused on the center of the flywheel of being self-aware. And then these 5 areas of our life, no particular order, but our health, our profession, which we'll talk about today, our worldview, money, others, and so on. But yeah, when I was asked to do this talk, this is at the Silicon Valley Club in downtown San Jose. I'll be speaking on behalf of the National Kitchen and Bath Association. I have a chair position, and I'll be speaking as the number 3 speaker. So I think there's a politician and then the head of the San Jose State Department of Design and Construction, and then I'll go up and say a few words about the industry. But every time I do a talk, I'd like to spend the time to focus on the audience. In this case, it's going to be 60 to 80 San Jose State college students that are have a major in design and construction. So the industry that I'm in, and I was just thinking, I've heard this concept before. So again, let's have some fun with it. It's not perfection. This is definitely the imperfection will be the perfection in this show, but the concept, and you seem to pick on it before. It's the letter that you write to yourself, right? And then the idea is that you open it up 30 years later, and was it good advice, or did it help you in life? And so often I get asked for advice. What advice would you have for me? And then as I started to think about that, why don't I just put that out to the audience? Let's share that. And a couple things came up, so let's have some fun with it. But yeah, the way it would go is, what advice would you give your 21-year-old self? And everybody's different, but you went to college, and you know what it feels like to be in your sophomore or senior year, trying to figure out where what your next step in life is going to be with this education and this world that's going to change for you in the next 24 months. And so yeah, let's just open it up and have some fun with that. I've got a few things. I'll start off with the first thing I'll tell them is what I tell everybody and this is also very relevant to what your recommendation was mentorship, right? I think we all need mentorship. We all need advice. That doesn't always happen right away, but I've mentored a number of young men and people, and my number one advice is always the same for anybody. 90% of life is showing up. Show up. It's hard to show up. It's hard to show up when you don't have money. It's hard to show up when you're uncomfortable, when you don't feel like you belong. There's a lot of reasons to talk yourself out of not showing up. But if you could show up, then you already have elevated yourself into a special group of people, because most people will talk themselves out of not showing up. And then, of course, what goes with showing up is then go ahead and show up on time. Now
Mm-hmm.
you've just become the 20% of the 80%, right? Show up all the time. Now you
Mm-hmm.
just become 20% at 80%. Show up prepared. Now you just become 20% at 80%, and show up with a positive attitude. And now you just became 20%, 80%. That's hard to do all the time. And so that
Yeah.
would be my first advice to anybody in life, but particularly somebody starting off. But yeah, if you can do all those, you are off to a really good start. So that's,
Yeah, yeah. No, it's great. I mean, it's really, and I love the simplicity of it, right? It's certainly not easy, as you said, but it sure is simple, you know?
yeah,
There's nothing complex about it. It's just hard,
yeah.
you know? But I would like to draw a distinction, and please correct me. There's two ways of coming at this 21-year-old advice thing. One is you're asking these students in your audience to write themselves a letter
Mhm.
to their own self at 21, and then having that, you know, in the bag for later on in life, opening up whenever, you know, on an anniversary or your 40th birthday or your 60th, whatever,
Mhm.
some event where you open it up and you're like, okay, how correct was I? How much wisdom did I have? You know, how much
Mhm.
perspective did I have back then? How did that letter serve me during the
Mhm.
course of my life in hindsight? And then the other angle on this is how might somebody like you or me, who's well into midlife, go back and say to a 21-year-old, if I had the ability to give you advice in hindsight, that when I was 21, these are the things that I would share with you. Are we
Mhm.
talking about both of those or just one of them?
No, no. Again, I so appreciate the way you created the frame. That's exactly was the intention. Was I again? I know that my room is 60 to 80% of the attendees will be students. You
Mm-hmm.
know, between the ages of, like you said, 19 and 22 or whatever, right? But I also have all the other adults in the room
Mm-hmm.
that I also want to have send this message out to. So yeah, I really appreciate you. You're kind of grabbing it the way you did, because um, even though the messaging is focused on that core group, it's a fundraiser, it's a gala for that department. Um, I wanted everybody in the room to think like that. So the letter could be the letter you wish you would have wrote to your
Mm-hmm.
21-year-old self.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the letter that yeah, the things that you did do that you would give advice to somebody that's 21 years old.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And maybe more importantly, uh, the things you would not do to your 21-year-old self. And we talked about this, right? There's mentorship and advice. I think I made a conscious decision not to give them advice, but to give them words of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And wisdom is timeless. Advice sometimes could be actually misleading or dangerous, especially in a time period like right now where things are changing so fast, right? Remember, I'm in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of Silicon Valley, right? Things are changing at a dramatic
Mm-hmm.
rate like we've never seen before. I find that very exciting, a lot of opportunities. But I also very cautious to give them uh, outdated advice that worked in my time or our time that doesn't apply to the world. So I'm very conscious of not giving advice that would lead them down the wrong road, and then they find out, 5 years or 10 years later. So I'd rather give them again,
Yeah.
I'm in the draft phase, so I haven't finalized it, but I've decided I want to give them words of wisdom, and I think I could do a better job by sharing some quotes that I've lived by or mantras
Mm-hmm.
that I've lived
Mm-hmm.
by. But
Mm-hmm.
again, no wrong answer here. This is the draft stage, but I do
Yeah,
want
no,
to,
it's good.
I
It's, I
do want
mean,
to handle
it's,
the whole room. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, no, you know what I've done for a living. I mean, people
yeah.
come to me for advice on this stuff all the time,
Well,
and I
that's
feel,
one of the reasons I thought it'd be a great topic.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what you do for a living, and
yeah.
this is career advice. This is a business um, event, right?
Yep. Yep.
So,
Yeah. And as I've said to you many times, I've always had a difficult time separating personal and professional
mm,
wisdom. And I love the distinction between advice and wisdom because I think advice is very easily could be considered presumptuous. Like, who the fuck are you to tell me that you know what's going
mhm,
on, right? Like,
yeah.
but wisdom is timeless, as you've said. And I think that what I one of the things I've done over the last few years in my writing is tried to do anyway is not give advice, not even give opinion as much as observation, and experience. Like in my experience, this is what I've seen. And I've said this to you a million times. Most people that go off to try and figure out what they want to do professionally have not spent enough time talking to themselves about who they are, who they want to be, what they want to do, why they want to do that, and crafting that story. And I think that giving yourself permission to do that, I think is probably wise, because I've seen so many people step into the what am I going to do for work scenario or journey and just go, I don't even know what I want to do. I haven't even given that some thought. I'm just like responding to ads and going online and putting a resume together and doing these things that other people are telling me are wise things to do. But what do I know? So I think people start, like I've said to you before, step 3 or 4. So I love the wisdom idea. I think advice is like a dime a dozen. And wisdom to me is what you've learned over and over and over a fairly extended period of time, and it continues to hold up as wisdom. Like, man, that I see that again and again and again. And the mentorship thing, that's just one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, go back to wisdom and something I've lived by, but I also think it's really good advice. You've heard me say this before, in the United States of America, particularly in the last 20 or 30 years, K through 12, we prepare them for socialism. We release them into capitalism and wonder why they fail. So the first advice, or let's just say advice or perspective I would share with them is that, and again, it's something I live by, and thanks to both our fathers, our family, right? They grew up. Our fathers grew up in a time where you were American first, and you go all in on that. And it's not a perfect system, but that system, it clearly is paid big dividends for our country and for these people. So my first advice was in this country. So that after I tell them about 90% of life is showing up, but you got to work and you got to show up. That's not hard. But I absolutely truly believe that in this country anything is possible, but you got to work. You got to show up and go all in on being American, on the American system. Our system is capitalism, and capitalism is like, again, it's not a perfect system, but like sports, business pays for people that deliver a product or a service on time, all the time, in consistency. And whatever you've been told about the color of your hair, the shape of your face or nose or whatever it is, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit, meaning that if you're good at something, the market will pay you, and they don't care what you look like. They don't care what you sound like. Just be good at it and they will pay you. I absolutely believe in that. And I think the worst thing you can do is prepare somebody, which they, let's face it, if it's an American university, have been, already confused and divided about these different groups. And by the way, this will be a very diverse group, right? I know that.
Yeah, it's going to be, I wish I was a fly on the wall for that one, as a matter of fact. But I think to your point, the other word that I could use to describe what you're talking about is a meritocracy, right? You eat what you kill. And it's an oversimplification, I suppose, but it makes the point. And the other thing that strikes me, Jim, is that I think that, to your point about showing up, I think that if I had it to do over again, which is a luxury that none of us have, I would seek out what it means to work hard early, because working hard is much of showing up, right? Showing up, working hard, because anybody can work hard. It's not easy, it's hard, but it's simple. Work hard. And then what I see as people get older is, if you really are maximizing your professional life experience, what you spend the rest of your life doing in my humble opinion, is, well, how can I work smarter? I
Mhm.
have the hard work thing down. Now, how can I work smarter? And what does that mean? Well, how can I utilize my own skills better? How can I do things that I'm really good at and love to do, and either delegate or outsource the things that I don't like to do or I'm not good at? And that becomes a life quest for me. Like as we speak, I'm trying to figure out how I can work smarter. But if the underlying premise is I'm going to work hard no matter what I'm doing, then the better I get at working smarter, the more efficient and productive and fulfilled logically that I become. And that
Mhm.
really resonates with me.
Yeah, some really good stuff there. In fact, I'll add to it with some quotes that I pulled off my wall. So, right away, right, the one that you just spoke of is this one. Success is a combination of hard work, skill, and luck. It doesn't all happen at the same time. Uh, which is really good, right? Because, like you said, it is a combination of things. It doesn't always happen at the same time, and there's no guarantees it, uh, it will ever happen. But this goes back to showing up. The only thing that anybody can ever promise you, nobody can promise you anything. And I'm not promising them anything, but I can promise you one thing tonight. This is obviously speaking to my audience. If you don't show up, nothing will happen.
Yep. Yep.
That's the only thing that you could be promised. If you don't show up, nothing will happen. So at least
Yep.
if you show up, there's an opportunity. You talked about mentorship and how important that was to you, later on after college, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're a 25-year-old, and yeah, how do you get mentorship? You show up and you show somebody that you're interested in, you care about a subject, and I think it's human beings, but also Americans, particularly here in the Bay Area, we like to help people. It's by its
Mm-hmm.
nature that we want to help people, particularly young
Mm-hmm.
people. But we don't want to waste our time with people that aren't serious, that aren't.
Right. Right.
We had the whole podcast in that, right? You have to be referable. You
I
have
was
to be.
just gonna say, I was just gonna say, it's so funny that you brought that up. I was
Yeah.
thinking to myself how I found my mentor, and I apologize for cutting you off,
No,
but I
please, yeah.
don't want to forget.
Mention that
part
that
of
podcast we
part
did.
of part of the reason that I found my mentor is I was playing golf with this young lady that I had recruited with next to
Hmm.
for 3 years, and she was very good, Joanna.
Hmm.
And we were playing golf, and I had not yet shared with her my current plight,
Hmm.
my impending fatherhood, my confusion about what to do, where to go, what to do next. What I had done with Joanna, though, is I had proven that I was referable. She
Yeah.
saw me work.
Hmm.
She saw me be honest. She saw
Yep.
me be diligent. She saw me be forthright.
Yeah.
She saw me be effective and productive and very
Yeah.
good at what I did. So when the idea popped into her head
Hmm.
that she should introduce me,
That's
there
right.
was no block. She was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you should go talk to Paul."
Yeah.
Right? It was
Yeah.
not like if I wasn't referable, that never would have happened. We still
Right.
would have played golf and we still would have had a good time and we still would have had fun. But she would
Yeah.
not have introduced me unless I was referable. So it's funny
Yeah.
that that popped
Mhm.
into your head as soon as it popped
Yeah.
into
But what did
mine.
what was the conclusion on that? To be referable, you have to be a couple things, right? Help me out here. I forgot them, but I know one was you had to be dependable. You had to show
Dependable. Yeah.
dependable, right?
Yeah.
And,
I
and
think reliable, same kind of thing. I think,
reliable, exactly. Dependable, as you know that you can depend on them showing up. They
yeah,
won't they won't
you're
make you look bad.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're going to do what you say you're going to do, or you're not going to
Yeah.
say you're going to do it. And
Yeah.
punctuality is
Yeah.
probably in there. I think
Purposeful. Uh,
purposeful. Yeah, yeah.
and
Good. Same type of values probably as part of that.
yeah. It,
Trustworthy. There's all kinds of good things in there.
Yeah, and at 21 years old, let's face it, you don't have that much to offer other than um, other than your potential value.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well, I think that also, Jim, finding, and again, I'm using my specific mentorship encounter, which turned gray, was that, I didn't really know what I was doing, to your point,
Mhm,
but he immediately saw my potential, right?
mhm,
And he immediately determined, if I can ask this kid a couple more questions and get him talking about a few different things about his life so far, then I can determine whether I can influence his potential. Because
Yeah.
it's not enough to have potential. You have to be willing to exercise that potential under the direction of someone who does know what he's doing, at least in
Yeah.
regard to what you're aspiring to do.
Well, this fits into, I think, what your recommendation was, search for a mentor, get a mentor. But you also said something that was really important, that that mentorship had value, had a two-sided value proposition. Not only did you benefit from that to learn something, but you made him a lot of money. And then
Mm-hmm.
this is what I was talking about. Go all in on this thing called capitalism. In
Mm-hmm.
America, if you add value to somebody, you make somebody money, you will be rewarded in this country.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to do it consistently. You have to do it with a good attitude, and you have to be dependable. And if somebody doesn't tell you that, or you don't demonstrate that, you're going to have a hard time from age 21, 22, 23, or whatever your pathway is. Uh, uh, I like to believe that's still the case. Maybe I'm outdated, but
No, I think it still is. I think another way of saying that is that don't ever feel like you're entitled to anything.
yeah,
No one is entitled to anything. And I think that's kind of a social cultural message that's a little bit convoluted right now. Like, because I'm this way or look this way or in this group or that group, that I'm
yeah,
entitled to something. No, you're not. None of us are. None of
yeah,
us are.
yeah, yeah. It's a one. Give yourself permission. I don't think you don't need to ask permission. Give yourself permission to be the
Mm-hmm.
best version of yourself. Again, I'm speaking to this 21-year-old person,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, going back to the hardware. Here's another quote that I have on my wall. I think you like this. The harder I work, the luckier I get.
Mm-hmm.
That's a Thomas Jefferson quote. And again, these are quotes. These are ways to live by that are timeless. They're,
Oh, definitely timeless. And again, I'm a huge fan of simplicity. How simple is that? You know?
yeah. Yeah, we can go. I can go deep on a bunch of these. The other one I use all the time, um, going maybe a little bit on career advice, but it's the Einstein quote: "Life's an illusion.
Mm.
It's all perspective."
Yeah, it is. It is. I'm just before I forget about the Jefferson one, it's like the harder you work, the luckier you get. It's like, well, then luck is not about luck. It's about hard work. You
Yeah.
actually can create your own luck, can't you?
Well, it's been proven. That's what you manifest your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not what happens to you in life; it's how you respond to what happens to you in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And another one I like here says, "Don't wish it was easier. Wish you were better."
Mm-hmm.
I love that one. I think when things go bad, the first thing that we do as humans is we start to blame the world.
Yep.
And that's really easy. Once you start blaming people, then that's a dangerous, dangerous road to go down because you can never turn around and come back out. But if you just pull back and you say, okay, how can I be better next time? Right? We're going to make
Yep. Yep.
bad decisions. We're gonna have failures, but what doesn't break you makes you. So it's a conscious decision to say when something goes wrong, wish you were better. Like go and be better at it. So the next time that happens, when you get your second chance or your third chance, you're ready to take that on and that's what it's about. But if
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No, I mean, the quotes are great. I mean, and they're quotes for a reason. Cliches are cliches for a reason. Quotes are repeated for a reason because they make sense. But one of the other things that's kind of creeping into my consciousness here is time, right? And
mm,
this notion that I think when I was young anyway, I really had no conscious understanding of time. Time was plentiful. It was
mhm,
infinite. There was no end to it. It was just today and tomorrow and some point in the future. And not to be the old guy reflecting on stuff, but it's like
mm,
we all know that's not true now, right? It's like what a valuable asset time is, and to maximize your time. And these, to me, pay attention to what's going on around you, listen to the birds sing and listen to your kids, put the device down, you know, be, hug a friend. I mean, we really, me personally, I shouldn't say we, because that's probably accusatory, but if I had to do if I only had one thing to do over, it might be a much more heightened appreciation of the value of my time. And that just popped into my head.
Yeah, I understand where you're going with it. Just remember, at 21 years old, you have time. Like that's why I appreciate what you're saying. We are at our age, we're running out of time, so you
Mm-hmm.
value it more. But when you're young, all you really have is time to learn something and to add value to the world. But so it is different. Again, this is why some advice is not transferable directly over. It has to be in relationship to the period in your life. So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I mean, it's all contextual. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
time is, life is a marathon, not a sprint kind of thing. It's, that ties into, from a career standpoint, all the way back to showing up every day. It's like small incremental change over time, right?
yeah,
Not
yeah,
like work
yeah,
hard 15 hours a day one time and expect a result. That's not the way
yeah.
time works.
Yeah, here's one for you. This has come up recently. And again, this is not advice for this talk or this letter to your 21-year-old self, but it is, and it's back to, I so much contributed to our weekly calls, our weekly podcasts of self-awareness, because the more self-awareness you have, the more you know you don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
those are the kind of people I like to be around, that are
Mm-hmm.
self-aware that they don't know everything, and they don't pretend like they do, and they certainly don't um, project, their life on you. And in fun, a lot of times, and it helps with a beer or a glass of wine, is it's all bullshit, right? It really is. It's all bullshit. And one of my favorite quotes, I've been using a lot lately, is we are all actors in this movie called life.
Mm-hmm.
He or she that plays the best role wins. So
Yeah, no, I've said it quite a few times to you and to others. Like, am I in a fucking movie right now? Like, what's going on? What's
yeah,
going on? Is somebody? Where's the camera?
yeah.
Where's what was the guy's name on the guy that popped the camera up and surprised people? What the hell was the name of that show? I can't remember.
Candid camera.
Ah, you're on candid camera. I feel
Yeah,
that way every once in a while. I really
yeah.
do. I'm sure we all do. You
Yeah.
know.
Now, what I like about that quote is that it also speaks um, to the movie genre, right? I think we're born with a default genre, a movie genre, right? And what are the categories, right? There's wife, go through the basic ones, right? But there's um, melodrama, there's romance, there's thrillers,
Comedy,
there's
comedy.
comedy. Yeah. I
Yeah.
really think that you can adjust your script, the genre. And if you want to look at life as funny, look at it as funny.
Yeah.
And there's, because every movie has a storyline, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if your movie is melodrama, then you're going to be projecting that on everything you do and all the people you
Oh
come in
yeah.
contact with. If your
Oh
movie
yeah.
is horror or suspense, then there's something to say for that, right? That if, and this is back to self-awareness,
Yeah,
it's a matter
it all is. Yeah. I
of
think
that.
I think the most important part of your observation to me is the ability to move in and out of different genres so that you're like, because I think my
Yeah.
default genre is probably comedy,
Is
but
it? Yeah.
I think it is, but I also know that comedy does not serve you all the time.
Not all the time. Yeah.
Everything is not funny,
Yeah.
and I have made many a mistake bringing comedy into a situation where that was not a comedic moment, dude. That was a bad
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah. Yeah. We could have a whole other podcast on this, but people have often ask me, "Hey, are you from the East Coast?" And I go, "No, no, no, I'm not. I was born in Oakland, California, right here." And they go, I go, you're asking me that because, obviously I look Italian, right? So they associate me with these actors like Sylvester
Interesting.
Stallone or um, I won't say his name right now because he's not a popular figure, but these Italian figures, right, in these movies, and I often laugh because John Travolta was, my hero. And what movies did he make? And same with Rocky,
Hmm.
Rocky Balboa. Right?
Yeah.
So even though I laugh, I laugh about it because you're just a kid, you don't know. Those movies do influence us in our life and how things play out. But the Rocky movie probably had the greatest impact on, my mentality.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come back and win. And that was
Interesting.
what I was probably 10 years old or something when that movie
Yeah. I
came
think it
out.
was 75, 76 when
Yeah,
it
I was
came.
10 years old then. There you
Yeah.
go. So
Yeah.
these are this back to about self-awareness. These things do happen. You can also, and again, I'm not picking on women, but you can tell when a woman's watched a lot of melodrama or romance movies, or
Yeah.
they have an expectation of how this movie's going to end, and when it doesn't, they don't like that. You're messing with
Yeah.
their movie. So
I
it's
know life is not a Hallmark movie,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but you know what's interesting, Jim, and this is just an observation because I've known you now for a while. I think the other reason people ask you that is because you don't have the California soft beating around the bush kind of thing. You're
yeah,
you're very frank,
yeah.
and I think it might have something to do with your dyslexia,
Oh yeah,
but
there's no doubt. Yeah,
but you people from the Northeast are like, fuck you, I don't like you, get fucked. They're not like,
yeah.
oh, hey buddy. You don't have that hey buddy thing. You're
Yeah.
much more direct. And
Yeah,
I
it's
think
funny.
that
It gets a time and a place. That's why when somebody asks for advice, say, "Hey, I'd be happy to give you some advice." But not sometimes in life, not sometimes, most times, it's not what you do; it's what you don't do.
hmm
I say, but remember, it was a different time. It was a different place. The time and place was a place where we physically worked through our problems. As in, we got in fist fights. We were
hmm
fighting and fight. And I say it was violent. It was also kind of fun, but that's how we work things out. And those
hmm
after that, it was over and you move on. And so that's it becomes part of who you are. It was the place and the time,
hmm
and you can't remove that from your mentality. Doesn't mean you take it on into life because obviously that's not a very efficient way to to settle things up.
Yeah,
But
that stops working in somewhere in the teenage, early 20s, hopefully.
yeah, but here's another quote I think you'll like, and then we'll wrap this up. But don't take criticism from people you never go to advice for.
Yeah, never take criticism from someone from whom you would not take advice. I remember you shared that with me, I don't
Yeah.
know, 6 months ago, maybe a year ago.
Yeah,
I
that was
use I
given to
use
me
that.
by a at the time she was 15, so
I
that's
know. I remember. I'll
yeah,
never forget that because I use that all the time.
it's great.
You know.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I think we're all susceptible to criticism. We're all human beings, and it's
Mhm.
like, well, who is this person criticizing me, and what right
Yeah.
does he or she have to be criticized? Why am I taking this so personally? Go
Hmm.
fuck yourself. I don't even fucking know you.
Exactly.
Like what am
Yeah.
I getting all worked up about this shit for?
Yeah.
You don't know the first thing about me. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually
it's
good advice for your 21-year-old self, right?
it sure is.
They
It
are.
sure
So,
is. Yeah.
so,
No,
so
I think no, I wish you well with your speech. I think it'll
yeah.
go well. I'm interested because we really didn't pay any attention at all, at least on this recording, to the 20% of the audience that's actually adults that are like, what do you see? And maybe this is not the forum for it, but what's the message for them? Or do you not really care? That's not really your, even though they're there, they're not really your audience.
Well, when I came up with the topic, I actually, I wanted to give them something to walk away with, a challenge or an action, a call to action, right? Hey, do this. And maybe it takes you a year or so, but write a letter to yourself that you can open up and feel and again, whatever that takes. But I also think it goes back to what we talk about every week, Mark, and that's self-reflection, right? What's
Hmm.
self-awareness, but some self-reflection. It's good. It's good for the soul. It makes you more human, um, and that's the message to those others. And then
Mm,
also when they are asked for advice or by somebody that's younger, that's trying to take on this new world. Um, be very careful what you say, and be very cautious not to give them outdated information that could mislead them for years. And at the end of the day, it's all of us are doing the best we can, and it's the being the best version of yourself, and that's very
Yeah, yeah,
personal. That doesn't you shouldn't. Again, I have too many quotes today, but my favorite one, right? All comparison leads to misery.
yeah,
It's hard not to compare yourself at 21 years old to somebody else,
yeah,
but be careful, because it will always lead to misery.
yeah, yeah. No, I think it's great advice, and I think that I'm to button it up for me is what you said about these older people being careful about not giving bad advice or being careful about what they say. And I really think what I've fallen back on, because I'm in the advice business, whether I want to be or not, I'm kind
Yeah,
of
you are.
there. And but I really prefer making observations about things and giving reflecting on things and telling stories about things,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to saying do this or do that, or don't
Yep.
do this or don't do that. Let me tell you a little story about my
Mm-hmm.
experience with that topic.
Yeah.
I think that's the way to avoid giving bad advice, because what you're doing with a story is you're asking this person to reflect on the story and draw their own conclusions from the story.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
that's important.
Great advice. And I think something else that you said was important is that you're telling us your story, but you're putting them in as the character of your story. So you
Mm-hmm.
say, that reminds me of something. I think this really applies to you, and really focus on them.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you're telling your story, but hey, I see you in this story, and I think you'll benefit from this story. So it's not that we're pontificating, about our story, but what you said is, I want to share something with you, because the power of a third party story is much
Yeah.
more effective than
Yep.
that. So that's
Totally, totally.
yeah.
You know what that is, Jim? That's good advice.
All right, my brother. So until next week, right?
Sounds good. See you, man.
All right.